We're about to start my favorite topic, and that's the actual administrative residency along with the manual. So if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and pull out your copy of your incoming residence manual. So this will be your little Bible for the rest of the year. What I'd like to do now is just kind of take you through some of the key areas that we want you to really be aware of for this residency year. So specifically the relationships, who all is involved in this next residency year. And I'm okay, right? Yeah, all right, thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started with the agenda that we have on the board. So first of all, I know Colonel Jones showed you a slide of some of our residency sites, but this is the most current one. So this past year, we were actually able to add 10 new residency locations to our residency site manual. So we're super excited to have added UAB, yay! So we've got UNC, Duke University, yeah, we've got quite a few. So you know that oh yes, Stewart Health for trip pilgrims also as well in Boston. So we've got quite a few that we added new this year. MUSC is a new one, along with the traditional ones that we've had for several years, and that includes Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, so we've got quite a few, Mass Gen, certainly UCLA, still on our residency menu. So we truly do have students that go all across the country. And so in addition to the civilian sides, we have quite a few of the military installations. So it seems like the Army ends up getting most of these students for the residency sites. I'm very excited though that we were able to add Air Force facility this year. So Doug Stevens is going to be taking part of the analytics here in San Antonio as well. And we do have Navy facilities open as well, but there's quite a bit of juggling that goes into play on who actually gets the students. So I think you've seen this slide as well. This is the didactic year. This is what students have, what ends up happening. But when it comes to the residency coordination, here's how it works out. We're here, students just arrived. Our current group of students are getting ready to go out. So between August and October timeframe is when I actually do all of the coordinating with the consultants. And by that, what I mean is every student, because we have such a multidisciplinary group of students that come in, will have a consultant that's tied to whatever core they're in. So if they're physical therapists, if they're physicians, if they're administrators, whatever the core may be, there will be a consultant that's involved in their chain to kind of help see long-term where will this student end up. So that's when I start the emailing out and say, hey, this is a group of students that we have. Well, let's talk, see what you want to do. How we place students is very specific. First of all, it's service. So if the Army comes back to me and says, sorry, we're going to have to send all of our students, Army students, to a military treatment facility, then those are the rules we follow. If the Air Force, as a matter of fact, came back last year and said, we want all of our students to go to top-tier civilian hospitals, okay, we can make that happen. But we want analytics. We can make that happen too. So we reach out and we try to find that. The Navy really wants civilian facilities. Okay, we can do that. But if the student says, hey, I think I want to stay at a military site, we can try to coordinate that as well. So all of this coordination comes into play. The other piece that falls into this is the program requirements. So we have a long-standing tradition with Mass Gen, with Cleveland, with Mayo, with Madigan, with Brooke Army Medical Center. So we need to make sure that we fill those sites. So if we don't have any student who volunteers for that, we try to gently say, hey, we've got to consider these. Do we have volunteers? If not, we're going to go to the next level, and we're probably still going to place somebody in those sites. So there are some locations that we absolutely must fill. And then, of course, student consideration. The student will put 3 to 5 locations of preferences for them to get assigned. And then we kind of have a big strategy session where we map out who's going to go to where. We truly try to match the right student with the right location. We're very, very concerned that we don't want to place a student who is absolutely has zero experience at a hospital and put them, say, like in a policy residency, where in Mary's case, they hit the ground running at a very high level. So we watch all of that. If we have 5 students who are vying for the exact same position, what ends up coming down to is academic performance. So again, we want to absolutely put the right student with the right location. Some organizations require interviews, not all, but some do. And so we go through that process as well. So that happens. Finally, around the December timeframe, students are actually all matched. Everybody's happy most of the time. What ends up happening quite a bit is that we end up with more residency sites than I have students. So I end up with a lot of sites who are like, you're not sending me, where's the love for me this year? Well, we try, we absolutely do try, but we just don't have enough students for the residency sites that we have. And then of course, the rest of the year is all the paperwork part. There might be interviews involved, there are orders that we gotta get the students transferred to, and all of that is happening in concurrent with their academic year. During the first year. Of course, they've got oral exams, and then finally, by the time July hits, that's when they end up in your locations. For you, this is what the residency looks like. Again, the student arrives in July, nice and eager, ready to roll. By August, they will have their first deliverable, and that is to submit to us their final didactic year bear. And part of why there's a little lag from them there is we need to take all of the oral exam scores, their final GMZ exam. We convert all that and provide that to the students, so they're so ready to leave when they finish the oral exam. So we give them that time to pause and fill that in. And then of course, throughout the year, we'll be tracking them. In October, they send us another update. Then the fun begins. By January timeframe, they have to submit to us what we call the mid-year draft portfolio. This is when they submit one completed, if you will, draft project and at least half of another one. This is for us to make sure the student is tracking, that they're actually being used with what we call meaty projects and not just Excel spreadsheet generation. So we want them to contribute to bring value to your organization with the projects. That's also for us to have an opportunity to say, whoa, student, you're way off track with how you're writing your portfolio, or whatever they need to do. And then of course, they continue on. By January, they also submit another updated bear. March, April timeframe, they submit their third bear updated, and then May hits, and that's when their final portfolio is complete. So stress levels go way up, because they're super busy trying to complete, to make sure that they meet all requirements. And then they finally go through the grading process. If there's a rewrite, come on in, ma'am. If there's a rewrite, they get to do it. Come on in, trust me, thank you. And then finally in July is the rest of the documentation that happens. So that's kind of the calendar year in a glance. Any questions from here? Yes, sir. Oh, and if I can get the microphone for this, because this one is being recorded. Thank you.
So I understand the intent of interdispersing progress reports, and you said it's the second report or the first report that they have to have a project complete. Did I hear that correct?
No. So their first project is not until January, and that's actually after their first progress report, which is due in October. So right around the January, February timeframe is when they do both a second quarter bear and their mid-year draft portfolio. So 1.5 projects completed in January.
I think to the dialogue with reference to the GMP versus the project pieces, you know, I think that you're really in a familiarization and learning your environment for those first few months, and you're not, unless you're just doing a very superficial project. I'm curious on how we're going to be able to wrap a polished product to completion in January when you're still learning. Is it an option to? I mean, they need to be starting on multiple projects, but having 2 partials, I would be looking at pressing 2 partials, because I'm not sure if they could have the competency to be done with one and wrap it up in a bow by January.
Yeah, and that's why we call it the draft portfolio. So that's when they submit that to us. Faculty, we're pretty brutal with them. I mean, we give them all the feedback that they need to know. Everything from, boy, your writing is not very good, to you're way off track with this part of it, and that allows the student to redirect and have conversations. So by no means is it their final product. It's what we call the draft. However, by this point, the students should have already rotated through quite a few areas in your facility. They have known the key players, and they've been able to identify some projects that they need to work on. Now, this afternoon, we are going to listen to 3 of our experienced preceptors. They're going to share how they come around creating their projects, because each residency site is unique. Some of our students actually end up in civilian hospitals where they're working with other interns from other universities. So they try to put them into that same tracking pipeline, so their timeline's even more aggressive. So, and then of course we've got policy residencies, which are a little bit different. And so, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about project generation and how do we come up with those good projects that will challenge the student. Yes, sir, Ren. Microphone, please. Yes, sir. See, aren't you proud of me, Mark?
So actually, just from a little bit on that about the mid-year, because that is actually a good time. It is a pressure thing to get that in there. But on the flip side, I had the opportunity to help, or we had the opportunity to help sort of redirect or point some things. I actually had one young man over at BAMC had a great idea, but he was way off base as far as the data that he was looking at and the numbers and what he was doing. And so a couple of appropriately placed questions, I think, and we had a pretty good discussion. And actually the final product, when he came up with that in this, in his final thing, actually I think was amazing. Honestly, I'm going to keep, General West could read it, and I think it would be very helpful for a lot of MTFs. So it's not so much a stress thing as a thing where we can touch bases with them again and say, hey, maybe you can think about this way, and I can be very helpful and productive on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
And then just the other piece, I think at the end of the day, it's really a forcing function, and so it starts that dialogue. So if there is an exception, or so we best understand how the residency plan is different, just because I think they're all unique at those. So it's really more of a forcing function, and at the end of the day, the dialogue, the forced dialogue between me and the preceptor, or me and the student, or the faculty advisor, sets the student up and the organization up, I think, for success.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Okay, so the second year, it is actually a 52-week residency year, right? And this is important because we structured it in such a way that at the end of those 52 weeks, the students have done enough academic performance during the residency that will grant them 9 semester hours towards their degree completion from Baylor University. So it's not just field trips, right? This is all part of what we try to challenge them for their academic year. Every student will have a tailored experience just by the sheer fact that they're going to such different residency locations. What we really are trying to do during this residency year is to have the student take what they've learned during their didactic year and actually apply it to real-world settings where they're in live action play, if you will, and all of this is actually happening at the same time. So the most important piece, and one of the just critical to the success of the program, is the fact that they get to work with senior executives such as yourselves, and they get that one-on-one mentoring and coaching. That truly is what sets our graduate program aside from other graduate programs, is that they have an entire year to do this. Now, we've seen quite a bit of different level of expectations when it comes to the preceptor role, and we're going to talk about that in just a few slides ahead. But what we really want to do is to help them achieve their personal goals. Again, taking what they've had, what they've shared with you on their bear for the didactic year, and then just apply everything and just ultimately help them improve in their leadership skills, grow as executives, and of course complete all the deliverables for the residency year. Okay, and this is where it gets to be fun, because for the student, there is a lot that they actually need to deliver to be able to get those 9 semester hours towards graduation. First and foremost is a residency plan, and we're going to talk about that, but if you want to go ahead and look in your residency manual, there is a table of content page. You want to kind of start looking at the idea of what we're going to talk about with the residency plan. So that's a major deliverable. They actually have to update the residency plan. So once upon a time, they used to tell us, this is what we're going to do for the whole year, and that's it. And of course, stuff changes, right? So now we hold them accountable, and they need to submit to us an actual updated, this is what we did the last 3 months. So again, it's just to kind of help them stay on track with where they need to see. Their portfolio project, we're going to talk a lot about in depth. The BEAR, those are the key reports. And then finally, at the very end, there's a preceptor completion memo where you, the preceptor, certifies that the student met all the deliverables and therefore is ready for graduation, pending, of course, that they pass the portfolio successfully. Much of how we are able to stay in touch with our student is via Canvas. So you will not have access to the Canvas course that they're enrolled in, but the student, this is how they submit all of their deliverables. So Canvas is pretty awesome. They stay enrolled in this administrative residency course for 2 years, starting in their didactic year. And this is where they will submit everything that they need to do, their BEARs, their residency plans, any paper product, if you will be uploaded via Canvas. This past year, we also added a new assignment in Canvas, and that was a discussion board. And prior to that, our students were sent off to the residency year, and they were gone to all different corners of the world, basically. Some would go to Germany, some were in Hawaii, and then we had them from the west to the east coast. So we wanted to kind of somehow keep that connection. When they're in our classroom in Baylor, they're literally sitting right next to each other day in and day out. And it's really hard for some students when they leave and all of a sudden they don't have that partner to reach over and say, hey, how do I do this? So the discussion board questions every month allowed us to kind of allow them to stay in touch and say, oh, this is what we're doing. So they all get a standardized question, they all discuss it, and again, it just helps students who might be floating out there somewhere to kind of redirect and get back on track. To Canvas? No, not directly. You basically have to be enrolled through Baylor University to get a Baylor ID and then actually get that. But your student, you can always ask your student to show you, and they should be able to share with you the Canvas. Okay. So again, what really works for us in our residency program is the fact that we have multiple stakeholders that play critical roles on here. And this is my favorite because this is in essence what the relationship is during the residency year. At no time are you alone in this. Now, some of you may recognize Colonel Dave Parker. He's actually our DCA at Brooke Army Medical Center, and he has been a longtime preceptor of the program. Fantastic job. In fact, he was selected as Preceptor of the Year last year for the program. So we're very, very happy that Colonel Parker is a partner with us. Of course, you will always have, back in the schoolhouse, you'll have an academic advisor for the student. All of us play academic advisor, so of course you've got Jason Unsworth right here. And then you have these fantastic students that are out there with the residency. Right now this is our Coast Guard student who's actually working at Mission Trail Hospital just down the road. There are a lot of responsibilities that fall on the preceptor, and this is the challenging part for you because you are already extremely busy individuals within your organization. And on top of that, you've taken on this commitment to serve as mentor, coach, and preceptor for the student. In your residency manual, there is actually a page that tells you everything that you need to do or that you should be aware of. And this is important because one of the most important pieces of it is, of course, and this is on page 3 of your residency manual, is when the student first arrives. What do you need to do? What are some of the expectations? So we outlined all of that for you in the manual. But first and foremost, you want to make sure that you provide a location for your student to actually work at. We've seen everything. Now, we do site visits. We try to hit all of our sites at least once every 2 years. But of course, it kind of depends on funding, right? And when we can actually go visit. And again, we've seen everything. So there are some students who will be located in buildings outside of where the preceptor is at. And then there are some preceptors who actually have a desk right next to their desks and say, you're going to sit here. We've seen the gamut. This is you. Whatever works for you, that's how you will do it. Some preceptors Hey, they schedule their mentoring time one-on-one on a weekly, monthly basis. Great. I've seen preceptors who have scheduled time from the time that they go from their office to the garage. That's the time they use with the student for one-on-one. I've actually seen them where they go work running together. That wouldn't work for me, but okay, that works for them. And then there's some that just do it once a week lunch or once a month lunch, whatever works for you. Now, if your schedule simply does not allow for you to have frequent meetings with your advisee, or with your student rather, you definitely want to make sure that you have a group of support people in the facility that you can also engage to help you with that. There is no way, there's very few that actually have them sitting right next to each other, but you definitely want to have a network of people that you can kind of say, hey, here's my student, please take care of them. One of my favorite things, I think Colonel Bergeron, I think this was you. Are you the one who does the letter for your student to take out? Yes, I love that. So you want to share just real brief, am I stealing your thunder for this afternoon?
Yeah, but that's okay.
Okay, no, then, okay, wait.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that I like to do with my students
A
is
microphone.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so one of the things that I like to do with my students is to have them write up a letter, right? And so it's basically just an introductory letter from them to the different areas that they're going to go rotate to. So in other words, if I have them rotating into OBGYN, for instance, it's a, because we are an Army organization, it's an Army standard memorandum format that basically talks about who they are, what the intent of the rotation is, and that letter then goes several weeks in advance to the department chief, right? And so the department chief is able to look at it, understands that, hey, number one, it's a reminder, oh, by the way, I've got a resident coming. Number two, it's not a medical resident, it's an administrative resident, which sometimes takes a little bit of brain switch for them. And three, then what's the objective? What are we looking for that department chief to do during the period of time that the resident is rotating through that area? And then I'd like to generally follow up about a week before with a quick meeting with the department chief to say, hey, you got this letter a couple weeks ago. Just as a reminder, the resident's coming next week. Here's what we're looking for. And really what it is it's a reminder that I want that department chief to provide or to work through a residency or a rotation in that area that exposes the administrative resident to all of those clinical things that he or she is going to need to know once they get into a position of leadership in the organization. And so they're able to then tailor okay, you're here for 2 weeks. These are the things I'm going to expose you to. And one of the things I'll do is just basically say, if you had to train me, right? I don't, you feel like I don't understand what's going on in your area. Here's your opportunity to grab a brand new, potentially, senior healthcare executive at some point later on. Now you have input into what he or she is gonna be able to do, or that conversation that he or she's going to have with your predecessor or your successor. So that letter is just the opening salvo in here's what the written documentation is, this is what we're looking for, but like I said, it's followed up with a personal conversation from me to that department chief, if you will, about a week before. So the letter comes out about 2 weeks before, I have an interaction 1 week before, and then the resident shows up the week later. So it's just an ongoing process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And again, that's just one way to kind of help your resident with that. This one right here, this is the student's opportunity to actually see how a facility operates at the very top. So you want to help your student have this exposure to executive leadership within your facility. Of course, we've already talked much about this, how to actually help the student develop their competency. This one here, periodically interact with the faculty advisor. Your faculty advisors will actually reach out to you in an introductory email, probably around late July, early August timeframe, that's saying, hey, here I am. If you need help, call me. And so that's how that will work. And of course, you will endorse all deliverables and the preceptor training. So this preceptor training, we ask our preceptors to come at least once every 3 years just to stay on top of everything that we've got going in the program. But in addition to that, we ask you to please join us once a quarter for a preceptor teleconference where we will once again just talk a little bit about what's going on in the residency program and then provide you with lessons learned, best practices from around the field. Okay, the resident. So these students come in, they are experienced, they are matured, they're ready to go. You can lean on them to do much of the requirement paperwork that you will be kind of facilitating with them as well. But it is their job to stay on top and track all the deliverables. You shouldn't have to be on them saying, hey, your bear is due in 2 weeks. That's their job to do that. But of course, they're there to make sure that they engage with you, that they take advantage of all those emergent opportunities. Again, this is for them to grow. So lots and lots of it. We ask our preceptor to seek out training, learning opportunities. But at no time, if you're in a civilian facility, at no time should our students come up to you and say, hey, can you hook me up and send me to ACHE? That is illegal on our part, so they're not to ask you for that sort of training opportunity. However, on the other hand, if you come up and you say, hey, we would like for you to go see this TEDx talk or whatever opportunity, and your organization is willing to pay and fund for the student, by all means, you're welcome to do that. There is some paperwork the student will have to file. Just, you know, we are government, so we need to make sure we stay clean with that. But absolutely, that's there. So again, their job is to make sure that they find those opportunities. They're there to kind of connect. We encourage our students to take field trips, if you will, locally to other facilities towards the end of the residency. So for example, by the time they hit the March-April timeframe, they'll have done most of the core rotations. So then it's the time to say, hey, is there a VA hospital nearby? Is there another civilian hospital that's out there that we can look? Mary Savitsky up in the DC area does an incredible job, not just for her resident, who by the way is right here, Eric Graybill. So we didn't want you to miss him, Mary, so we've got him right there for you. But she also invites all of the residents that are up in that NCR area. So Mary, thank you for doing that, because I know they absolutely enjoy those opportunities. And then of course you have your faculty advisors. So their job is to be there. They're the liaison for you, for the student, for the schoolhouse. They are there to make sure that the student is tracking with their projects, with their bears, kind of provide that feedback as well as you, in the same way that you provide feedback on the bear, our faculty also provides that as well. And they're there to kind of help the students. So you'll see that when they start doing their projects, one of the things that we will ask them to do is to identify what method or tool from the didactic year they're actually using to develop their project. So many of our students will call back to the faculty advisor and say, hey, I'm doing a BCA, can you help me with this? And that's when they do it. Hey, I want to run some, you know, some SPSS on the data that I have. That's when they call the faculty advisor to make sure that they're tracking and going in the right direction. And of course, they also, the faculty advisor also facilitates quarterly meetings with the resident and the preceptor, and we grade all of the students' assignments. That's me. You're gonna get a lot of email. No, you won't get a lot of email. I try not to inundate you with email, but during the July, August timeframe, there's a lot of coordination that does go on. So please do not auto-delete my emails, okay? Or send them to a folder. No, just kidding. But I do try to keep you abreast of anything that's going on with the program and just make sure, hey, heads up, this is what's coming up. And again, it just takes all of us to be able to get that student towards graduation. I do help Colonel Jones come up and discuss what site locations we will go and do a visit on. And in the residency manual, if there's anything that you need or you identify, we can go ahead and help you with that. And then, of course, what we really do try to do is just strengthen that relationship with the residency location, make sure that we have the right fit, the right student with the right location. Any questions on any of the faculty or any of the stakeholder responsibilities at this point? Yes, sir. Mike, please. Sorry, Mike, please. Thank you. I know. I'm sorry.
No. So if we're towards the end of the residency, if we're going to reach out to a local organization that's not already involved in the program, like for me up there, say I reach out to First Health, and I want to have my residents spend a couple months there.
Yes.
If we don't already have some type of gratuitous training agreement set up with them, who do we run that through? I'm assuming we should have one.
So that one would actually be between your facility and the civilian side. Now, I have an example of a short visit that I'm happy to send to you that we use at AMET Center and School for our student who's going to go visit a temporary location. If you shoot me an email, I'll be more than happy to send you that template. And if you don't have one already, you can easily just copy. It's standard Army verbiage that says, there's no clinical, there's nothing, just, watch our students. Okay? Any other questions at this point? Okay. So Ms. Pryor, Renee Pryor. So you may see some email come from Renee Pryor as well. Renee is our endpoint for all things graduation. So, and I'll tell you that just a couple weeks ago, we've sent all the detailed message to all the residents in the field saying, hey, graduation's coming up. Congratulations, you've passed your portfolio. Make sure all these documents are tracking in order for us to be able to certify you. So again, all roads lead to Ms. Pryor. That is a very helpful person that you want to have in your FYI contact leads as well. And then of course we have Colonel Jones, or Lieutenant Colonel Jones. He is our program director. He provides oversight for all things academic in our program. He actually is the approving authority, if you will, for all of our residency sites as well as preceptors. Now, once your students hit the ground running, you will actually get an appointment letter that says, hey, congrats, you will be serving as a preceptor for our students. So it's actually in writing that we provide you the document. One important role that he plays is with the final portfolios. So at the end of the year, when the student submits their final product, we grade it as a team. So we divide and conquer, all the faculty team up, and we actually grade student portfolios. If for any reason there is a disconnect somewhere with the grading, Colonel Jones is actually the one who has the final say on that. Serves as the appeal authority for all disputes, ends up certifying all the residency completions, and then of course there's several awards that we give out at the end of the residency year, and he's actually the approver for that. What I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the residency plan. So if you will, please turn to page 24 of your residency manual. And I'd like to discuss a little bit on how we have structured our residency rotations. Now, before I even get into this, I will tell you, you all at your facilities will decide how your students do these rotations, right? What we wanted to do is just provide a little bit of structure to this process. In previous years, students would go to a facility and they were basically there and they could go explore whatever they wanted to do. At the end of the year, we would have students who had never been to an OR, or students who had never seen logistics, or students who had never seen a critical area of the hospital. This is the one time in their career, if you will, that they have access to everything in the hospital. So we encourage our students to see as much as they can to help them be those better executives when they grow up, as I like to say. So again, what we like to do is just have the student at the beginning of the year identify what they're going to do for the year. This is the student's job to do. On page 24, though, there are what we call some core rotations. And these are the areas that we say, you need to look at these. Now, if your facility doesn't have it, we understand. If you are what we call a policy residency, which puts you outside of a hospital, then there's flexibility on how we can do that. This year, I had a student who is actually working at the EMISM here. That's the Enhanced Multi-Service Market office. So of course, they don't see patients, they don't do that. But they send him to BAMC to kind of explore. They've sent him to the VA to go see those rotations as well. That particular student is a nurse by trade. So there are some things he did not need to go see, but there were many other things that he absolutely needed to get a hold of. So that's how you work those core rotations on there. Again, this is up to you how you totally decide where to go, but we would like our students to at least visit those areas. The next few pages, 25 through 27, I believe, is the template of how the student's residency plan is going to look like. Remember, their first go at a 52-week residency plan is due mid-August. Now, this is them sitting down, being strategic, planning out, During this 52-week, we tell the student you need to include 4 weeks of leave in there. Usually Christmas time or holiday time. Sometimes they do spring break. Sometimes they want to do during Thanksgiving. It's up to them. Okay? Maybe they have a wedding that they need to go to. That's totally up to them. But they need to put 4 weeks in there somewhere. We also tell the student, build in 4 weeks of research. Research meaning this is their time to kind of sit down, process everything that they've seen, do those lit searches, do whatever they need to do because they're still in the academic role and must produce an academic product. That's their time. We highly encourage that they do a research week just before their mid-year draft portfolio is due and definitely before their final portfolio so that they sit down undisturbed and they are able to finalize their product. Now, stuff happens. So let's say that they plan an OR rotation for, I don't know, sometime in, I think I have example 1 October, 5 October. You're at a facility, something has happened and your OR is shut down. Okay, well that's out. Well now you're going to have to put in that OR rotation somewhere else down the road. That's why we ask the student quarterly to send us an update of where they've actually been. So at the end of the 52 weeks, we actually see, okay, you truly have completed and you've gone through the whole facility and gotten a good look. Any questions on the residency plan? Concerns? Thoughts? Too easy? Yes, I like that. Okay. All right. I want to briefly talk about curtailments. So every once in a while, we will have a student who just cannot meet the 52-week requirement for certain issues. This year, I don't think any of you are getting, but there are 3 young ladies who happen to get pregnant this didactic year. Well, the Army gives them 12 weeks of convalescent leave. So the question comes in, what do? If you take 12 weeks off, you're not going to meet the requirements of the 52 weeks. We have some students who are required to go to ILE. What does ILE stand for? Intermediate level education. Thank you so much. ILE, military. It's a military school, and it's usually at the end of the residency, and they have to leave 4 weeks early. Okay. There are several scenarios. This year, or this past year, I had 2 students who ended up with knee surgery. So that kind of put a little spin on things, on how do we do this. That's okay. We've got a plan. 52 weeks. What we tell the student is, option 1, you don't graduate in August. We simply take your plan and we extend it out if the hospital says that they can stay. Okay? No big deal. They just graduate in December. Of course, our students, no, I need to be with my peers at the August commencement. Okay, let's go to plan B. Plan B, you cut down the number of leave weeks that you put in there. Okay? Sometimes, if the preceptor says it's okay, we'll start them early. Or at the very end, or we cut down research weeks. You decide how you want to do it. This is your plan. This is your strategy. How do you want to get this piece in there? I've had students, young lady who delivered her baby almost at the end of the residency, and she says, I'm just cutting out my research time. That's okay. Whatever works for the student and works for you, we are okay with. At the end of the day, though, the most that we can curtail, and that means just cutting off at the end, is 4 weeks. So that we can curtail up to, the student can do 48 weeks and still be considered having met all requirements. Does that make sense? And so we'll just work one-on-one with you if you have a student who falls in that situation. Of course, our students being active duty, and some of them are civilian. We have one VA who goes to the VA, and then we do have some Army civilian students who also will end up at a military facility. My point being that all of them required evaluations at the end of the residency. So if your student is an active duty Army student and they're at a military treatment facility, your rating chain will provide that OER for them. If they're at a civilian facility, then what will happen is Colonel Jones will end up doing the OER for them, and then we have the senior rater will be the dean of the graduate school at AMET Center and School. So, and then of course Navy students will receive their NOD reports, Air Force students will receive their training reports, and civilians, we have a system that we do that within our treatment facilities. So questions on the evaluation piece? Excellent. Okay, now the fun part, the GMP. So at the end, a student is responsible for submitting a graduate management portfolio. And this is where it gets to be a lot of fun for the student, she says, because this is basically the capstone that is required of them to graduate at the end. This is intended to challenge the student. This is intended for them to provide value to the organization based on the projects that they take. Most importantly, it's an opportunity for them to continue to grow their competency, apply what they've learned during the didactic year to it, yes, and have that level of rigor that we expect of any graduate student. Now, the portfolio itself they'll only submit the 4 projects. And by the 4 projects, what I mean is there's 3 actual projects that they will do and 1 best practice. And I'll talk about those in just a minute. But the 3 portfolio projects, you're going to get examples this afternoon of some projects, and I'm going to show you some here as well. And then the best practice is just an opportunity for the student to say, wow, I did my residency at Womack Army Medical Center, and they're doing this here, and I think everybody needs to be doing it. That's kind of the level. Civilian sites, we see so many fantastic best practices as well. They're going to go out there, they're going to see something that they're doing really well, and it's an opportunity for us in the military to say, hey, let's leverage a little bit of what's going on in the civilian side. So that's what the best practice is. The student basically confirms that it is a best practice, again, applying some of the tools that they use during the residency year. The hardest part for the student is condensing this and writing it into 3 pages. Because boy, they can write up all day long. But then we're asking them, take all of this that you've done, maybe it's a Lean Six Sigma project or whatever, and condense it to 3 pages. So that's really the big challenge. In your residency manual, there is an appendix there. There's a couple of areas that provide you detailed description, and the students know this should know this. So when they come up to you saying, I'm not sure how to do it, send them right back to enclosure C in the residency manual. That's page 28. This is an example of the product that the student will submit. It looks just like this. I send them the Microsoft Word document template, and they just plug and play into it. I tell my students, follow the recipe. Don't go getting exciting and adding all kinds of things to the problem statement. Follow the recipe. Okay? If they do that, they will get there. So 3 pages of write-up, they can have up to 4 pages of appendices. So of course we ask for a lot of data, a lot of graphs, etc. That does not get counted against their 3-page write-up. So this is a great example of what it actually looks like, and it's written for them in the explanation form exactly what they need to do to submit their product. Again, as I've already mentioned for all of this, we do try to post some portfolios to Canvas for the student to see, so they'll have an example. But bottom line is this residency manual is what provides them for it. Now, when the student, you'll be working in conjunction with the faculty advisor, making sure that they get it. I know for me, I had Colonel Lynn from Fort Bragg was one of my advisees, preceptors this past year, and it was pretty good. He'd call me up and say, hey, I've got Adam, he's going to be doing this project, what do you think? I think it's great, sir, proceed. So he would, and so they'd get it going, and it was great. They produced the products that they needed. So in essence, you're the first step to this portfolio process. You're the one who says, yes, this is a good project, or maybe we should go this other way with it. And then, of course, the student has January timeframe to kind of get feedback from the faculty. And then ultimately, the May project, as I've mentioned, we divide into teams to actually grade it. Colonel Jones is the final approval for that. So 2 things can happen for the student May timeframe. One is they successfully pass. Now, what's interesting is that they're not going to get a grade, a letter grade or a numerical grade on it. They're just going to get go or no go. You passed or you didn't, right? We do use rubric. They do get feedback on how well they did, but ultimately, they either passed or they didn't. If they do not pass, it is considered a rewrite. Now, if a student gets a rewrite, they will get 2 additional weeks to somehow fix, improve the process, do whatever they need to do. and then they resubmit it. The same team that graded that portfolio the first time will be the same team that grades the rewrites, and then we decide what happens from there.
What % of the residents end up doing
So the good news is not that many. This year we had one. Last year I think we had 3, maybe 2 or 3 that had them. So it's not that many. The really good news is usually when a student resubmits that rewrite, they get it. And it's usually minor things. They just kind of went off track on something. Yes, sir.
And to add on, I think that's the value of also the midterm review. And so we catch that stuff earlier than later and have enough time to shape and mold those. And so that's really where the catch is. And that's the outcome of that is really just one this last year.
Yeah. Now, sir, you're going to ask a question? Go ahead. Yes, sir.
So another one of those things, I had several after the mid-year entry. When they got comments back, I worked with several different residents then over the next couple of months, and quite a few of them came back to me at the end of April, beginning of May, and said, hey, would you mind going over this and take another look, especially the new projects? And I was more than happy to do that. And actually I very much appreciated that. I was able to see what they were doing, and then actually when it came time when they submitted them, I think I had one of the quickest turnaround times for grading because they were great. It was a running process, and I'd been able to help them. So that's also, I can't speak for all of the faculty, but I think it's a great interaction and can help a lot and sets them up for success.
And it's pretty funny. In January, when the students get the feedback, it's the equivalent of getting a paper that you've worked so hard on, and it's just bleeding in red with this is not right? So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, student panics. This is so sad. I put all this effort. But it's, again, that critical eye that we give the student that says, hey, you really need to fix this.
And to confirm.
Mike, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So I've run into this in the past. To confirm, we're helping them from an academic standpoint and not a military professional writing standpoint.
Correct.
Because those are diametrically opposed. So.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yes. So, where we do end up with some not so good news is what happens if the student's rewrite does not meet the standard, right? Then what happens is they go into what we call the legacy thesis. And basically what happens is the student then has 5 years to produce a product that's similar to the old GMP that you guys were mentioning over here. So it's a traditional thesis that is heavy, and that's when the success rate seriously plummets. Because once the student leaves our program and they get assimilated back into the rigors of day-to-day expectations at their facility, it gets really tough to produce that. We've just had this past year several students who reached that 5-year mark that just didn't make it. And it's unfortunate because it was 2 years of a really important time in their life that they just were not able to get that degree. So ultimately, we are responsible to Baylor University to provide a curriculum that's robust for the student during the 2 years. Okay, so here are some examples of some projects, and this is by no means the end-all be-all, but this is just a tiny sample of projects that your students can actually run into. Of course, we love data. So anything that will provide the student opportunity to do statistical analysis, yay you. Business case analysis, absolutely, but they cannot turn in 3 projects with BCAs, okay? And we've had some pretty impressive BCAs get submitted. Everything from opening up a brand new urgent care clinic for one of the major medical centers here to different BCAs across our military treatment facilities as well. Lean Six Sigma projects seem to be some of the favorite ones out there. What do you think the problem is with Lean Six Sigma projects? They're never done, and they're lengthy. They take time, and the student is working on a very condensed timeline. So they've taken the green belt class. I think this year they even have an opportunity to do the black belt class simultaneously during their didactic year. So they're loving it. They want to hit the ground running, do Lean Six Sigma. Great, until you're trying to bring in all these people from your facility to get this project done. And then they will be calling back, hey, can I just do a piece of this? And that's when you work with the advisor and saying, hey, we can do this part of a Lean Six Sigma project. Certainly operations management, ethics, Chaplain Unsworth, Dr. Zucker, just love that, legal studies, policy analysis, anything with strategic management, lots and lots of opportunities to do projects for our students. Yes, sir?
Which ones do you see students struggle with the most?
Ooh, faculty. Which ones of these do you see the students struggle the most with?
I'll speak, and I think probably each of us can. I think the biggest one is scope, right? And so what we were alluding to earlier, I mean, if they did a whole project where they can tell you everything they did on that project in 3 pages, well, then it's not deep enough. The other is scope when they do a big project and they really, really want to tell you every single thing they did in 3 pages. And so basically they give you every 5th word and they just throw it on a piece of paper and it makes no sense. So I think scope is. And so, they need to do something that's of value for the organization, something they learn, something that they're working with you, and then just in about 3 pages, and that, and these are general guidelines, and basically say if I've got 3 pages to tell the executives in my organization, or translates into a 10-minute elevator speech or something about what we did, that it's, that it's got to tell the story. So scope is at least the thing that I see them challenged with the most. And I think that's something we all probably learn anyways as executives.
Thank you. Tyler? Okay, Brent.
I took the microphone, sorry. Actually, one of the key things, I think, even across the types, is it turns out a lot of people have a struggle actually identifying the problem and therefore the question that they're asking. So a lot of it is, they're sort of nebulous. Hey, I'm going to look at this and the value of this program, and then they're not looking at the right data. They're not looking at the analytics, if you will, that pertain to that question. And a lot of that is if they don't know what their question is. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't help on what type, but especially if you're looking at data analysis. There's an example, hey, I'm going to look at this training program, and then a lot of data were used with GS civilian salaries. They had nothing to do with each other. So I was like, okay, you need to be looking at the right place. Mm-hmm. And there were several, I said that they just started, hey, I'm going to look at this, but that's not really a problem statement. Right. So just identifying exactly what it is, and then it helps define that a lot better, and then they have direction.
Thank you very much.
And I would just add to that discussion that as part of my class, my operations management class, as I mentioned earlier, I actually have the students work in teams to go through a hypothetical project and then write up one of these products using the same template. So they have some experience in figuring out what a good problem statement really is. Should be 1 or 2 pithy, concise statements of what is actually going on and what it is that you're going to be addressing. But people have a hard time kind of getting to that, so it's a little bit harder to then focus the remaining paper on something that's even meaningful, because you end up sort of scratching the surface on a lot of different things that are tangentially related, and then you never really get anywhere. But I would say, and I think to your original question, sir, you were asking which of those types tend to be problematic. The ones I've seen, when people try to tackle things like statistical analysis or BCAs, the intention is good, but oftentimes the skill set isn't necessarily there. Yeah. And so they've got a lot of numbers, but even them, it's apparent to me when I read it that they're not really sure how to present it in a meaningful way. So beyond just getting the analysis right, it's how do I tell a story? You can hand me 10 different spreadsheets and say, here's the data, but there's really an art to making a case for why you're doing it in the first place and what change you want to see come about as a result of the work that you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so being able to take it and give a really good, compelling, 3-page analysis, which, you can equate to something like an elevator speech or any kind of short duration thing that you want to get something out of this. So you're not just writing up because it's an assignment. You're actually writing it up so that it can have some meaning and bring about some kind of change in your organization. So it's up to you to sell it. And that's the part that a lot of people, particularly with statistical analysis, they'll say, look at all this great statistical analysis I've done. Well, what does it really mean? Why are we doing this? What's the bottom line? And as I said earlier, being able to have the courage to take a stand and make a recommendation based on what you've done.
Thank you. And I know for me, one of the funnier ones, I guess, is I had a student call me up and say, hey, my preceptor wants me to work on fixing the TDA for a facility. Well, Fort Hood's TDA has needed help for, I mean, so you have to, going back to scope, right? So you just need to be careful. But take a piece, I'm sorry? Yes, thank you. You just need to kind of take a piece of that and make sure that works for you.
It's the manpower document.
Yeah, the manpower document, I'm sorry. It's just basically putting, all of the manpower for the facility, which is, actually creating line paragraph. It's rather extensive. Comment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. Another thing that seems to be a source of challenge sometimes is figuring out what role is sufficient for a resident when it comes to presenting a piece of work that's been done. So some people may feel like, well, if I wasn't the lead on this, does that mean I can't write it up? Or if I was just one piece in a much larger team working on something, how do I tackle that? Yeah. And both of those scenarios are reasonable for the sake of meeting the requirement. Mm-hmm. It's just incumbent on the individual to make sure that they're not overstating their role in it, but nevertheless focusing on what it is that they actually did as part of that. So I may be part of a 20-person team crossing multiple departments working on this huge initiative, but I can't go in and say, well, I went in there and we fixed this. My piece of it was this piece of it, and making sure that piece was sufficient to, where everyone has a good feeling that, that's enough to meet the standard. But people have a hard time sort of differentiating what they do and even how much help they can get when it comes to writing up these things. Right. Some people will say, hey, I'm hesitant to have anybody read this because then it seems like they're doing the work. It's like, no. Be sure to share what it is that you're doing and get as much feedback as you possibly can. This isn't a test. We're not seeing how much you know and then you have to do it all on your own. Write up what you have, share it with your preceptor, share it with some of your other colleagues at the organization where you're working. Get as much feedback as you possibly can. Not only does that result in a better product, but ultimately, and more importantly, it creates more of those bonds of professionalism that allow you to come up with something really meaningful and helpful.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so going again, the residency manual just basically takes you through all the requirements for the project itself. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I do want you to know that there is a part, again, this is an academic paper, so there is a component where we're asking the student to provide sources that support the work that they're about to engage in. So of course they do a literature review. We ask that they provide at least a minimum of 3 sources to, again, for their background and their study. And the methods is big because this is where they're taking and identifying what they did didactic year and actually applying it to it. So the whole data collection, if they're doing interviews, whatever it is that they're doing, we want them to briefly explain their methods. The results in the discussion is one of the most important pieces of their product because, of course, ultimately, this is where they're telling you what they found during their actual study. They summarize their data, they summarize their analysis that they've found, and then they absolutely should be explaining all the supporting documents that they submit with the graphs and the charts and the tables and any other data that they have. This is when they kind of tie back in. This is what my problem statement was. This is how my results address that problem statement. And any consequences or limitations to the study should also be identified. Again, ultimately, what we want them to produce is something of value for your organization. Of course, you're going to take this, you're going to look at it, and you say, yep, this is feasible, we can do this. And perhaps you can actually implement it, right? And so it's ultimately up to you what you do with the actual work that the student does. We do have a piece for conclusion for references and again figures. We do hold them accountable towards APA writing style, so that's all in there as well. And again, they just summarize all of their findings, their problem, their purpose, etc. All right. Any other questions on the GMP? Okay, so 4 pieces, 4 components that go into the final portfolio. 3 are actual projects, just as we discussed. The final product that goes in there is what we call the best practice. Now this best practice, the whole idea is that they're going to, as they rotate through your organizations, again, if they find something that is an amazing process that you have going in there, that's what they're going to identify. There is also an appendix in the manual that will guide the students towards completing the requirements for the best practice. Basically, they'll have to tell us why they think it's a best practice, all the criteria that they use to do that. They're really going to look at the benefits. Are they tangible? Are they measurable? Now, and for as much as we would like to take this best practice and again leverage and use across our enterprise as well, it is up to you whether or not that best practice can be shared. We recognize that some, especially if you're in a civilian facility, is proprietary, and we will honor that. We will not share that anywhere other than the academic intent of the portfolio. So that's in there as well. But again, we're just asking the students to identify what's working out in the field, in our industry, and of course to quantify and to just basically say, why is this important and why should we consider doing it as well? And that's really what a best practice is. And we've had the gamut on best practices, everything on a dimmer's eye if you're in a military treatment facility and how to capture dimmer's eye or how to improve the accuracy piece to it, to the civilian side on hand washing or whatever else we can identify on the civilian sectors. Again, more information on how we go through, or how your students should actually be going towards the evaluation criteria for the best practice. All of this is basically the outcomes based. Is it sustainable? Is it something that we might be able to take? But we really are trying to find those innovative processes that are out there in our industry so that we can try to leverage from that. This is just going more into the detail of the actual write-up. All of this is actually in your residency manual, so I won't bore you with the details of that. We've already had quite a bit of discussion on the bear, but we just briefly just touched on the fact that this is a major deliverable for the students as well as for you. And then I want to just talk a little bit about the documentation. All right. If you take nothing else out of this, please take page 11 out of go to page 11. These are the key dates for your students. Again, students are responsible for their deliverables, but this is something that you as a preceptor just kind of want to keep an eye on and make sure that they submit everything. I've already mentioned the Canvas discussions. We do this once a month, and they're always due by the 15th of the month. They have to post their question and then respond by the end of the month. Their final residency from the didactic year bear and the residency plan is due mid-August. And then, of course, you have all your bears. Your mid-year draft submission is the 11th of January, and then the big date, 10 May. 10 May is when their final portfolio is actually due. So again, as you're planning your residency for the whole year, the student should consider 10 May as one of the top dates that they need to stay on top of. We also provide you dates there for when we actually return the grades. We usually take about 2 to 3 weeks to go through these, all of the portfolios and provide good feedback and honest assessments on it. If they have to do the portfolio rewrites, there's a date for them as well. They'll have 2 weeks after that. We do have Preceptor of the Year for the student. If they're going to nominate their preceptor for this, the write-up is due by 1 June. And then finally, at the end of the residency, the statement that certifies the completion of residency must be submitted no later than 19 July. And of course, that statement is after the student has found out that they've passed the portfolio successfully. The other dates that I'd like to highlight for you are actually on page 21. These are the quarterly teleconference dates. Now, we try to schedule this out as far in advance as we can because we recognize you're super busy people, but we kindly ask that you please join us once a quarter. Again, this is all part of preceptor training. This is an opportunity to come together from the field and just say hello, touch base, via teleconference. It is old school because we've got places from overseas trying to to dial in as well. So we try to keep it just to a regular teleconference, no WebEx or anything like that. So just please join us. And again, we share information from the program. And we usually do try to get a guest speaker on there for just a few minutes as well to share what's going on in the field. So please add those to your calendars and please join us on those teleconferences. Questions on the key dates? All right, your preceptor, the final completion, the preceptor certification memo is nothing more than just on letterhead, you saying, yes, my student has met all the requirements, they were good students, they can graduate. It's just a very simple, the template's in the manual there. You will indicate whether they pass. You are an extension of the faculty, so you state if they pass or if they failed. I hope that if you encounter students and you think that you are going to fail a student, that you'll have reached out to us as soon as possible. And that is super important. Please, please, please. Our students are incredible, phenomenal students, but if for any reason you find yourself with a student who's just not performing to the expectation of your expectations or ours, please call us. The sooner the better. And it comes up every once in a while. It happens, right? So, but we want to redirect. These students are active duty for the most part, and yeah, they're held accountable to standards. We do have some awards at the end of the residency year. We do try to highlight our students' performance. So we have the Boone Powell Award, Award for Excellence in Research. And basically what happens is after the portfolios are graded, the staff will identify their top 3 portfolios from the team that they graded. And then we all go back in, we read those, and we vote on the portfolio that we feel is most worthy of this award, and then we present that at our last teleconference. The Dean Tolan Preceptor of the Year Award, same thing. Students will submit nominations for their preceptors, and then we announce the winners in the July teleconference. And then the other one that we have is the Best Practice Award. We do separate that from the portfolio write-ups. So again, we look at those best practices submitted, we identify the top 3, we vote on those, and then of course we announce the winners in July. So just a quick list. This is probably the ones that I would recommend to you that you kind of earmark for your go-to. Please use the residency manual. I'll send it to you electronic as well so that you'll have that available for you, in case you need to pull it up on your phone. Just kidding. I know you won't, but that's okay. So all of these that are on there are the ones that I recommend you earmark. A lot of enclosures. And we actually provide enclosures for our students for even things on the tools for success, on appropriate wear, etiquette. Again, please keep in mind our students are coming from a military environment, so if they're going to a civilian, sometimes there's a little learning curve, but they've got it. They've been doing great all year on the tools for success. So, and I think that's it. You all have my contact information. We do have an area in the book that has all of our faculty email address and telephone numbers as well. Wow, got through a lot of information. Questions? No questions, y'all are hungry. Yes, Matt. Oh, okay, so Andrea, you had your hand up first. If you would go ahead and ask yours.
So coming from a civilian facility, there have been certain years where I've had the resident email me, I'm going to DC for the weekend. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of like, okay, that's nice to know. So that concept is, so like what are the expectations, I guess, of the residents in terms of reporting their whereabouts while they're on their residency?
Colonel Jones, you want to take that one? You want to take that one, sir? Use the mic. Use the mic.
Probably more of a discussion, I guess.
Okay, so we'll save the discussion for that. Okay, so we'll answer your question after. Okay. Sir, you had a question?
Just a question with
Yes.
flexibility on, I know you have a scheduled date.
Yes.
Looking ahead, perhaps the preceptor may not necessarily be there on that end date.
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of flexibility is there without putting the resident
Oh, I'm
in
sorry.
a position with,
Yeah, I'm sorry, the microphone they were asking. But go ahead, you can keep going. So for the end date, right? So, yes.
Just a question in reference to the flexibility for the preceptor having a 19 July date. If one was to leave sooner,
Yeah.
how much flexibility for
Sure.
the resident so that you're not putting that individual in a difficult position for
Yes, thank you. I
completing
appreciate that.
sooner than
Yes, sir. And in our
projected.
military, because there's such transition during the summer months, if you're going to be gone for more than 30 days, maybe we could even push it to 45 days, then we will have to appoint in writing another preceptor to kind of cover during that time. For example, Fort Belvoir, they have their transition now, but their new DFA, DFA in the Navy, right? Okay, so the new DFA just came in to replace the outgoing Army DCA, right? Initially, we thought there was going to be a 2-month gap, so we were going to identify a former experienced Baylor Bear to kind of cover down during those 60 days. But it turns out the Navy sent their person early, so too easy. We just kind of switched over that appointment letter there. So I would say that if it's more than 30 days, we would need it in writing. Otherwise, we ask that you just have somebody there to kind of provide the student with oversight. You will still do the completion memo for them. And you still sign that the student completed everything and just date it on there. Okay? So, any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. Of course, you can call, you can email me anytime with questions you have, or your faculty advisors.